Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on the new Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos book for D&D 5th edition. Before I get into that though, I just want to just let it be known that this book was sent to me by Wizards of the Coast for the purposes of putting out a review video, so I do want to thank them for that. However, as with all the review videos that I do, Wizards of the Coast is not scripting the video or influencing what is said in the video. They're not pre-screening it or making sure it meets with their approval before it goes public. They get to see it at the same time as everybody else, and the opinions that I express in this video are 100% completely and totally my own. So Strixhaven, it's one of those books that I wasn't really I wasn't following very closely. Now, as a general rule, if I think I'm going to be reviewing something, I usually will stay away from a lot of spoiler stuff or a lot of explanation videos on what the product is, because I always like to sort of give my impressions of something as genuinely as possible, and I like to have as few preconceived notions going into getting a book as possible. But I was expecting this to be similar to Ravnica or Theros, which was a campaign setting book first, that includes an adventure or a few little scenarios that you can use for the different colleges contained within the Strixhaven Academy. But this is actually a campaign book with a little bit of sort of setting material thrown in there. It's actually designed for a group of characters starting at level 1 and going up through level 10, which is kind of the standard for adventures more or less these days. That's kind of, I think that's generally speaking, and I know from personal experience, those tend to be the levels that get the most play anyway, and I think Wizards kind of realizes that, and they're targeting a lot of their adventures and modules and what have you towards that level range. So it's levels 1 through 10. The retail price on this is $49.95 US or $65.95 Canadian. Now this is going to be a spoiler light. I try to keep the adventure stuff as spoiler free as possible, because you don't necessarily need to know beat by beat what happens in the adventure. I just hope that sharing my thoughts on its structure or the things that I kind of like about the way it's designed and stuff like that will hopefully be enough. I can always go in and do a more spoiler-heavy video in the future. I know I've said that before and haven't gotten around to doing them, but right now I've got a stack of stuff that I'm trying to get through, so when things kind of calm down a little bit more, then I'll be able to sort of get back into doing those. But we'll flip through these. The adventure sections, I'm going to go pretty quickly through. But yeah, let's just sort of dive right into it here. All right, so we start off with the Welcome to Strixhaven. So the basic premise behind this book is that the characters are going to be students at the Strixhaven Academy, and it does give you a little bit of information here. For example, even though it's sort of an academy of mages, or that's sort of like it's a mage school, or that's the impression that you're given, you don't necessarily have to be a full-on dedicated spellcaster in order to, basically partake in the events in this book. It basically states that, if you're a wizard or a cleric or a druid or like a full-time spellcaster, that's great. But any class that has an archetype that gives you access to spellcasting features, or things along those lines, even if they're not actual spells, they could be like spell-like, similar to I think they give an example of one of the barbarians from Xanathar's Guide, the Ancestral Guardian. They give you some sort of spell-like abilities. So as long as you have some sort of magical abilities that you have access to, then you can fit in really easily with this particular book. And even though it does have a default plane, the fact that it takes place again sort of in an academy, you can really place it in any campaign setting with very little difficulty, I think, overall. You may have to change a few things, but there's also all kinds of schools out there that exist in other campaign settings. The fact that this was a university sort of founded by a group of dragons, personally, if I were to run this, I would probably set it in the Eberron campaign setting, and maybe even try to tie the Draconic Prophecy into it. But you can fit it into a campaign setting pretty easily. Now, because you are actually in a university or school setting, there is some interesting things that this book incorporates or introduces and has part of the actual gameplay as you're going through. We're just going to sort of skip through a little bit here. I just want to try to find the page that has it. This just gives you information on each of the different colleges, sort of what they study, what their philosophies are, like the faculties, I guess, where they're located on campus, sort of the environment, stuff like that. We'll get back to the races stuff here in a second as well. But because this is a university-based adventure, there are actual aspects of being a student that's actually incorporated into this book. So, for example, in addition to just like the regular adventure portions that you go on, you still have things like your studies that you have to maintain. You have to do exams periodically throughout the course of the campaign. You have extracurricular activities that you can be a part of, and you can even have professions where you earn basically your upkeep or your stay while you're at the academy. And we'll talk more about that when we get there. We also have a new player character race available to us, so you can now play the Owlin. So the Owlin it's basically an owl-like humanoid. With the ability to fly. They have dark vision, they can fly, they are trained in stealth because their feathers, I guess, sort of mute the sound as they're moving. So that's basically that's all the abilities that they have. It's a very small list of abilities, which is kind of interesting. I was honestly expecting a bit more from them. But the thing about this race is it's designed using the alternative method that was given to you in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, where instead of having set attributes, bonuses like +2 to strength or +1 to wisdom or something like that, you can actually just choose one attribute to put your +2 bonus into, and an additional one to put a +1 bonus into, or you have 3 +1 bonuses that you can distribute. It allows you to customize your attributes. And there are things I like about that. There are things I don't like about that. I'll sort of circle back on that when we get sort of to the review portion. Right now, I'm sort of showing you some of the stuff that's in here, but we've got that. We also have our backgrounds for each of the different colleges contained within the university. So essentially like the different schools that you can sort of go to. Now, what I like about these ones is, in addition to just the regular stuff that you get for most of your backgrounds, which is your personality traits, your starting equipment, and some sort of like feature that you can take advantage of, this one also gives you a spell list that is specific to each of those schools. So even if the class that you're playing doesn't have access to the spells on this list normally, then you still get them here. And I believe these are all also considered to be prepared and available to you to use without actually having to use up one of your slots that you have to prepare yourself. So it's kind of similar to like a cleric's domain, basically. But I like the fact that in this academy for magic spellcasting characters, if you have like spellcasting abilities, you get to add these spells to your list. I think that's kind of a neat way to expand on the backgrounds, and it really makes sense for the context of this adventure. The spells essentially kind of mimic the idea of like what it is that your philosophy and area of studies that you're focusing on while you're there. Like those spells are kind of like the fruit, I guess, of all that work. So that's, again, really cool stuff. I do like that introduction, or that expanded version of the backgrounds. We also have some new feats that are thrown in here as well. They're basically just initiate feats for the different schools. You also have a mascot feat that you can take. So you've learned how to summon a mascot. Essentially, it's like a familiar, and gives you some different abilities there. So again, it's kind of cool stuff. We also have some new spells in here. Not a lot, because again, not every character is going to be a full-on spellcaster. Some of the players may be making characters that are simply have spell-like abilities, like we mentioned with that barbarian, the ancients one that we have there. So there are a few new spells here, but nothing too drastic. But there are some cool ones here. So there's only a few, so we're going to go through all of them. So we have Borrowed Knowledge. So this one here, it's a 2nd level divination spell, and it says you draw on knowledge from spirits of the past. Choose one skill with which you lack proficiency for the spell's duration, which is 1 hour, so it's not concentration, thankfully. It's just a set duration, but for that duration, you are considered to be proficient in the skill, and that lasts until either that hour ends, or if you cast the spell again to use it with a different skill, it will drop the one that you previously had. But again, it's just a cool, way of being able to get that proficiency if you really need it in a tough situation. You also have Kinetic Jaunt, which is a second level transmutation. It's a bonus action instead of a regular action. But now this one is concentration up to a minute, but again, it's also just a bonus action. While you're concentrating on it, your speed increases by 10 feet. You don't provoke attacks of opportunity, and you can move through the space of another creature, and it doesn't count as difficult terrain. If you end your turn in another creature's space, you are shunted to the last occupied space, or the last space that you occupied before you entered theirs, and you take force damage. So it's a little bit of a teleportation effect as well. It's a minor thing, but again, can be useful. Silvery Barbs. So this here says you magically distract the triggering creature. So it is, the casting time is 1 reaction, which you take when a creature you can see within 60 feet succeeds on an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. So it says you distract the targeting creature and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. The targeting creature must roll the d20 and then use the lower roll. So it's imposing disadvantage on the roll, but it can only take effect after it's already been declared. So it kind of breaks the mold of a lot of the abilities that we've had in 5th edition that can give you a reroll or certain things where you can only do it, after the roll is made, but before you know the results. This one, you actually have to know the results because it says that they have to actually succeed on the ability. But it can turn that success into a failure if they roll poorly. The other benefit of this is when you then choose a different creature you can see within the range. The chosen creature has advantage on the next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw makes within 1 minute. A creature can be empowered by only one use of the spell at a time. So again, it's kind of something where when the enemy makes a successful attack roll or skill check or whatever, you can force them to re-roll, and as a side benefit, you can choose another person within the spell's range. They get advantage on the next, like I said, the attack roll. So it's again, it's sort of a utilitarian thing, but it can be useful in a pinch, and it uses your reaction. So it's I kind of like that as well. There are some spells that use reactions, but most of them are. I shouldn't say that, but the ones that I'm familiar with, the ones that I've used in my time with 5th edition, have all been stuff that kind of just affects you personally. So I do like this one. We also have Vortex Warp, so you magically twist space around another creature you can see within range. The target must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, or the target can choose to fail. So if it's like an ally and you want to get them out of harm's way, then you can just do it. Or if you're trying to, if you're using it on like an enemy or hostile target, then they can try to resist it. The target is teleported to an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within the range, which is 90 feet, so pretty decent range. The chosen space must be on a surface or in a liquid that can support the target without having to squeeze. So you can't put them into like a tight, like a crevice in a rock or something like that. And then we have Wither and Bloom. This is my favorite of the spells that are introduced in this book. So it says you invoke both death and life upon a 10-foot radius sphere centered on a point within range. Each creature of your choice in that area must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 2d6 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. Non-magical vegetation in the area withers. In addition, one creature of your choice in that area can spend and roll one of its unspent hit dice. You regain a number of hit points equal to the number you roll on the dice plus the spellcaster's spellcasting attribute. So instead of it being like, your dice plus the character who's rolling the dice, their con modifier, it would be the wizard or the cleric or whoever cast the spell. It would be their wisdom or intelligence or charisma modifier on top of whatever's rolled on the dice. So this is a spell, so this is my favorite one that we have in the book. The main reason is that it actually makes use of the hit dice, which not a lot of things really do. It was one of those things like in fourth edition, I know there were a lot of things that targeted your healing surges instead of just like a regular healing spell. It would allow you to use your own healing surges. At first, I didn't really care for that, but as time's gone on, I've really started to like that approach. And this is a spell that essentially does that while also being able to damage enemies and stuff as well. So I like that, and I really do like the fact that it uses your hit dice instead of it just being like a generic healing spell. It's one of those things that you have to have the resource, and I know a lot of times the players don't really use their hit dice that much. They'll just, try to take the long rest if they can and get everything back. So I really like that spell. That's one of my favorite ones. We also have some new magic items in here. I'm not going to go through each of the magic items. There's some cool stuff. So you got these like primers, which are basically like magical textbooks, and if you're carrying them, based on the magic college that the book belongs to, it gives you bonuses on a certain skill checks or certain role types of rolls, which is usually equal to like 1d4 bonus. As long as you've got the book, then you're holding on to it. You can also get a cuddly mascot, so you basically get it's basically like a stuffed animal or like a plush. But you can actually, if you have it on you, and you can attach to you, but if you have it on you, it can actually reduce fear effects that are targeted to you, which is really neat. But my favorite one has to be the bottle of boundless coffee, and it doesn't really have necessarily like a mechanical effect. It's just sort of a flavor type of item, but it's a common magic item, so it's easy to come across. And it's something that I would have to say, if I actually was able to create magic items in the real world, that's probably one of the first ones that I would go for. And if you overuse it, each time you use it, you have to roll a d20. If you roll a natural one, then you're basically cut off. Anyway, it's a neat item. I really like that one. All right, so now we're going to get into the school-based elements of this book. So we have essentially what they refer to as a report card. So this is something that the characters would use to track certain things when they're going through the game. So they can track what their job is, they can track what their extracurricular activities are, how they do on certain exams, and we'll talk about how exams and all that stuff works as well. There's also relationships, so there are several different relationships that you can form. You can have a character that, you sort of, what's the term that they use? It could be like a friend, a rival, or a beloved. So basically, if it's like kind of the romance or just like a close friend, or again, a rival, someone that may be sort of a minor antagonist towards the character. Certain actions that you do throughout the game can increase or decrease the score, the number of points that you put into either the rivalry or the friendship, and they will have certain different effects, which is again kind of interesting. It's just a great role playing thing to have, and it sort of forces the players to forces is probably the wrong term, but it encourages players to think about like their interpersonal relationships with various NPCs. And it does give you some NPCs in this book that you can utilize for like friends or rivals or stuff like that. So with extracurriculars, they're basically, like they could be involved in sports or just other like after school type of things. Now these mechanics were things that on the surface I was not really interested in. And I guess I was going to say this for the report, but I'll say it here so you can kind of see how I've come around on it. So each of these, like, for example, your extracurriculars and the exams that you have function kind of similarly in terms of mechanics. It's kind of like a minor skill challenge. There are certain skill checks that you're required to make, either for your extracurricular activity or even for your job, and as well for the exams. If you succeed on those, then you actually get these checkboxes here. You can sort of fill them in. And what that means is that you actually get a D4 that you can use to boost one of those types of skills. So, for example, if you're involved in some sort of like sporting thing as an extracurricular, and you have to make athletics or acrobatics checks as part of like engaging in that extracurricular activity, if you succeed at the extracurricular activities, then later on in the game, when you're in sort of like more of the adventuring mode, and there's a point where you need to make either an athletics or acrobatics check, you can actually spend the D4 that you earned from engaging in that extracurricular to help you boost your roll. It's a minor mechanical thing. It's not as, it's not as powerful as granting advantage, but it's a nice little benefit that can actually make a big difference without necessarily, like I said, being quite as overpowered as getting like advantage on a roll. So I really like it. It's kind of like the oh, what's the? It's I think it's a cantrip. I forget the name of it now. But basically, you can just grant someone a D4 bonus on their skill check. But this is one that they can just simply have built up if you don't have the cantrip, and you can choose when to do it as opposed to the cantrip having to be cast on you and then you utilize it later. So I really like that. For report for your exams, as you're going through your years in the academy, there are 4 years that you go through here. There are points during the adventure portion of the game where you have upcoming exams. For the exams, you can choose to study, and the exams again are done similarly. There are skill checks that you have to roll. And if you succeed on the skill checks, then you pass the exam. If you fail an exam, you actually cannot benefit from your extracurriculars or even your job until you basically pass a makeup exam at some point. So it's one of those things where, again, it's sort of minor, but it can affect your ability to take advantage of some of the other aspects of the book. So again, I kind of like that. So, but you can study. You can do like just a regular study session where you make a skill check, sort of like a practice against the exam, and if you succeed, you get a free reroll that you can cast or that you can use. So when the actual exam comes, let's just say you fail your roll, but you studied, you can actually just re-roll that. You can also do like you can pull an all-nighter, which basically gives you 2 re-rolls that you can use, but it also grants you 1 level of exhaustion. And depending on what events are occurring in the adventure and when they're occurring or what point they're taking place in, that can actually affect things. So again, you got to be careful about burning the candle on both ends. You can also simply choose not to study and just go in and make the rolls and let fate decide. But the thing I love about the exams is that you can actually try to cheat. It is actually an option that you have. So let's just see. So we got for the exams, we have the studying phase. That's where you sort of determine. But yeah, you can cheat. And what that means is when you're doing the exam or when you're preparing or during the study phase, before the actual exam, you can roll a deception check or a sleight of hand check to essentially create like little like cheat notes. And if you succeed against the DCs of the exam, you can pass it without actually having to do the study. It's kind of neat. Although if you get caught, you can if you're caught at all, you basically fail the exam automatically. But I don't know, it's neat. I like that. Again, I like that idea. It's kind of one of those things where I don't recommend it in real life, but from a fantasy perspective, I do really appreciate the fact that they incorporated the ability to do that in the actual book. So I think that's really cool. And again, with the exams, if you pass whatever skill checks that you had to make as part of the exam, you can gain that bonus D4 dice to use on a future skill check related to it. So it gives you an actual benefit for it. So while again, like I said, these were sort of aspects of the book that I personally wasn't all that interested in, or I kind of rolled my eyes at when I first saw it. I really like the way that it's implemented, but if you're not interested in doing any of that, then it has a little sidebar here just saying, if you really want to, you can opt out of all of that. Like the adventure portions of this book are actually designed in such a way that they can either be run together as a campaign, or they can be run together, or not together, but they can be run as standalone adventures that can have little or nothing to do necessarily with the actual academy itself, so without student life. So again, I like the fact that they at least, make it clear in the book's description that, hey, if this isn't something that you're interested in, you can drop it and just move on to the adventure stuff, and it's going to be perfectly fine. But I would advise or suggest actually giving it a try. It's a mechanic that personally I would like to take and actually incorporate into some of my future D&D 5th edition games. but not necessarily have it revolve around the characters being students, but just things that they can do, hobbies, or have sort of like downtime stuff. And that's what I really like about the extracurriculars and the jobs, is it really gives you something to do during your downtime that will mechanically can actually help you while you're out doing the actual adventure. So I like that aspect of it. And even if I'm not too keen on like the whole it being related to college or university life, I do like the idea of taking that mechanic and trying to implement it in my own campaign. So I think, again, it's really cool stuff. And like I said, here we have some of the NPCs that you can either become a friend to, a beloved to, or a rival to. So it gives you some nice examples, quite a few different characters that you can sort of that you can choose from. And then we get into the adventure itself. So like I said, I'm not going to focus too much on this portion of it here, but the adventures themselves each take place over the span of a full school year. So each of the 4 chapters for the adventure is actually a year's worth of time passing within the game world. So a lot of what we have here for the adventures are going to be sort of more like events that take place, or there will be like some locations that you have to explore, stuff like that. The first year, as you're being sort of initiated into the school, there's sort of like a scavenger hunt kind of thing, which is interesting. There are clues that are given to you. You have to try to puzzle them out either yourself, or you can do skill checks if the players aren't, really that into trying to ponder that sort of thing. But if you succeed on them, you can actually gain like little, like magical items, or just some like just some consumable items that you can use, or things that can sort of help you in certain situations later on. So again, it's just really kind of neat stuff. And overall, I really do. I like the way that the adventure is structured. I like the fact that there is time between each of the events, so things can kind of breathe. It'll give you an opportunity to do those. It'll give you an opportunity to do those extracurriculars, or to go to your job. But we also have, like I said, the exams here. And I'm just trying to see if I can find one, because I've kind of flipped past some of them. But we actually have, like I said, there are points where you have exams. So we have the exam here, what it is, what the topics are, and it sort of gives you what skill checks that you're using. So we've got like Arcana and Investigation for this particular one. And again, if you succeed, then you get a D4 that you can spend on either an Arcana or Investigation check later on in the game. So again, it's just really cool stuff. I really like the way that that's implemented. It also gives you the DC for the study sessions and stuff like that. So again, it's just a really interesting concept. Now, so this is divided into 4 different chapters for the adventure, each one being its own year. This one here, the Magister's Masquerade, this is my favorite of the 4 chapters, or the 4 portions of the scenario. I'm not really going to get into too much here, but I love the way that the villain of the campaign, sort of his machinations here and the things that he's sort of doing, and how it can affect things, or how it can potentially make the characters look like, they're the ones responsible for some of the bad stuff that's been happening. It's just a really cool, well-designed section, in my opinion. And this is the chapter that also really takes advantage of the rival system that you have. So, the characters' rivals will at one point come to basically confront them, and things can go kind of awry from there. So, again, really, really cool stuff. So we're just going to sort of skip past the rest of the adventures, because like I said, I don't want to spoil too much there. But we do also have some new creatures included in here. So the creatures will also have the different dragons, or the different creators of the different mage academies. I don't think they have all of them, but they do have some of them, I believe, in here. Just some really cool monsters like Witherbloom. I love this guy. And again, he's sort of the one that's connected to that spell, where you can wither and cause necrotic damage to people within a certain radius, but then allow someone else to actually gain or spend one of their hit dice. So yeah, again, really cool stuff in here. CR 24. So it's nice to have them in here, but you probably don't want to fight them with your characters. But again, a lot of really cool creatures in here. I love, growth They have the different scholars for the different schools, the mage hunters. So these guys are interesting creatures as well. There's some really nice artwork included throughout the book, and that's basically it. It does also come with a map, which I haven't removed from the book yet. I think it's just a larger version of the campus map here. I'm probably going to leave it in the book for now, just because I have a really poor success rate with getting these, like removing these without causing any rips or tears. And yeah, so but if I do remove it, I will take pictures of it and put it up on my Instagram. So we have the standard version here. So this is the regular cover that you can get from just about any major book retailer, your local game stores. It's a nice looking cover. I do like that. And then we also have the game store exclusive cover. So this, I think it kind of mimics the appearance of like a student's textbook or something. It's nice. I do like sort of, again, the metallic sheen to it. It is a fingerprint magnet. This is only like the second time I've handled this book since I've got it. So it is a little bit of a fingerprint magnet, which like a lot of these covers kind of are. It feels like it has a little bit of like the rubbery kind of coating on it that some of the earlier game store exclusive covers have had, but it's not bad. It's like I said, it mimics the kind of like, or maybe not necessarily a textbook for the school, but maybe like the books that the students would write their notes in or stuff like that. Or it's a cool looking cover. It's I would sort of put it in the middle ground of the game store exclusive covers. Coming off the heels of Fizzband's Treasury of Dragons, which is, in my opinion, the best alternate cover. It's not as impressive as that, but overall, it's not bad. I know there are people out there that love the exclusive covers, so that's sort of what that looks like there. So that's what we have. So overall, this is an interesting book. It's one that like I said, I wasn't really too keen on initially. So like the whole idea of like the college life and stuff like that, it doesn't really appeal to me personally as a 38-year-old man going on 39 in just a few months. But it is really, really well done. And I have to say the mechanics behind it have kind of won me over. The book was designed, or the lead design for this book was Amanda Hammond, and I'm familiar with her work with other gaming companies, and I've always been impressed with her approach to things. And it like, you kind of really feel like the influence of her abilities as a designer in things like the exams and like the new spells that are introduced and some of the new items. I just think overall that there's a lot of really great stuff in this book. I love the mechanics behind extracurriculars and the studying or exam sort of stuff. And I think it'd be kind of neat to actually, like, if you're doing a section in just another campaign where the characters are researching something, maybe allow them to make those kinds of checks and present it as a little bit of a minor skill challenge. And if they succeed, grant them that D4 bonus towards, a check related to what they just did in the future. So whatever skills they use to do as part of the researching, to be able to actually have that minor bonus, but still a bonus nonetheless, in the future. So I actually really like that idea, and that's something I 100% plan on lifting. The extracurriculars is, in my opinion, one of the better ways to handle downtime. And again, grant a minor mechanical bonus that the players can take advantage of for tasks that are at least loosely related to their downtime activities or their hobbies or whatever it is that they sort of do when they're not adventuring. So I really like that aspect of it. As far as the adventure itself goes, I do like the villain of the adventure. I'm not going to go too much into like the character, any of that stuff in this video, because I really don't like to spoil it, but it is a former student who has a bit of a grudge against the university. I don't think that's necessarily I don't think that that's a huge spoiler. I think that's probably like a pretty logical way to go about it. But it is a creature type that you normally don't see as a main antagonist. And they're creatures that I really like personally. So I'm glad to see them being utilized a bit more and actually having it sort of be one of the main focuses for the campaign. I really like the way that that's done. Some of the things that the character, the villain does throughout the campaign. Again, really interesting stuff. The masquerade or the that section, like that third chapter of the campaign, like I said, my personal favorite. I might discuss it later on in a separate video, but I really do like that. Another big thing, a really big thing about this book, though, is the fact that when they were designing it, they wanted to make sure that the elements contained within could be used or not used based on the group's preference, or that the adventures can actually stand on their own and be used for just your regular, like could be done outside of like the Strixhaven environment or outside of like a school environment, and just try to incorporate aspects of them into other games. So I kind of like the fact that you can run each chapter just as its own adventure, completely disconnected from the others, if that's what you want. I do really like that approach. It's kind of almost, again, like having a little collection of modules. It's not quite the same as having like something similar to Ghost of Saltmarsh or stuff like that, but it's still, again, really cool nonetheless. I also like the fact that it takes place over an extended period of time. And that's maybe a minor gripe, but personally, so many of these campaigns have like the characters starting as these like humble, your first level characters. They're just coming of age and leaving their hometown and striking out for the very first time, and then getting caught up in this whirlwind of potentially apocalyptic events taking place, and everything happens within really just the span of a few months, and they go from being just completely green to being the saviors of, whatever plane of existence that you're on. So the fact that this takes place over the course of 4 years, it's a smaller story told over a longer period of time, and that's something that I actually really personally like as well. While I may not be going out of my way to run this as a campaign, I really appreciate the design that went into it. It's very well written, it's well thought out, and I think they did a really great job for it. And it's a niche thing, and I know I've said in the past that I like the fact that Wizards of the Coast is branching out into more of like niche territory, with like what we had with the Ravenloft book, what we had with the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and now what we have with this book. Because it's niche, it's not going to appeal to everybody. So, if you're not interested in like, a college or Magic Academy kind of setting, then that's fine, right? It may not be the book for you. But if you're intrigued or if you're interested in it, I do recommend checking it out. And I think it's going to be a really good campaign to run. And while I'm not rushing out to do it, I wouldn't rule out the idea of running it in the near future. It's just I've already got a bunch of stuff already on my plate. But it's something that I could definitely see picking up, some point down the road, and definitely giving it a try. The Owlin, the one thing I'll say about the Owlin is I kind of wish there was a little bit more to them. It's one of like the extra races like you have in the player's handbook, like the Dragonborn and Tiefling, and like those types of races where they're basically just the one type. They don't necessarily have things like the sub races, like the dwarves have the hill or mountain dwarves. The elves have like wood elves or high elves or drow, right? It's just sort of like just the broad category. They do sort of change things up a little bit by not having fixed attribute bonuses, which is, it's one of those things that I understand the reason behind it. And I know that there are people out there that really do like it, and I appreciate the fact that not every member of a particular species is all going to have the exact same, sort of upbringing and skill set. So I kind of get that. The only difference, the only thing that I would really change is because it's an owl race, and in D&D's history, we had the spell Owl's Wisdom, which granted you a bonus to your wisdom score. I would have taken the +1 bonus that you would get normally, so the +2 and then you get the +1. I would have had that +1 be assigned to their wisdom, and then give you the option of putting the +2 wherever you want it, or to break that +2 down into 2 +1s and to assign those wherever you want. It's just, like I said, I kind of, I get that they're not all going to be the same, but I think that, there are just some inherent things that you think of when you think of an owl, at least in a D&D context. So I would have liked to have seen like the alternate version where it's like, if you want to use fixed attribute bonuses, then this is what they would be, or you can use this method and these are the things that you can get. So I kind of would have liked the choice, but again, it's a personal thing. It's a nitpick, really. But overall, it is a really well designed and very well written book. Like I said, I'm familiar with Amanda Hammond's stuff from other companies that she's worked with, and she's definitely an excellent writer, and I really like her approach to things. So it's definitely worth checking out. I do recommend at least flipping through it and seeing what you think of it yourself. And again, if the school-based stuff isn't to your liking, the book does freely state that you can just drop all that and focus on the adventure if you want. But for me personally, I plan on taking those school-based mechanics and altering them and putting them into my future games because I like the idea behind them. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. What do you guys think? Have you picked up Strixhaven already, or did you have it pre-ordered? Were you expecting this to be a campaign setting book? Because it's really not. It's not a campaign setting. There is some setting stuff. It's more like a gazetteer with a campaign attached to it. So I didn't watch the review video, but I did see like a thumbnail where someone had, in the thumbnail it said that it was a great adventure, but a horrible setting. Or like horrible as a setting book, but great as a campaign book. I forget the exact wording of it, but it's not. It's a campaign, like I said, with the gazetteer attached. So if you're expecting a fully fleshed out campaign setting like the Theros or Ravnica book, this is not what that is. But it's got more focus on the adventure, and again, you get a more long-term story instead of just having a first level introductory chapter. You've got a level 1 through 10 campaign. So. Great stuff there. I think it's definitely worth checking out. So thank you guys very much for watching. Again, thank you to Wizards of the Coast for sending this to me. I really do appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great, a day, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is that you're watching this. It really does mean a lot to me. And wish you nothing but the best. Until next time, take care.